6 emerging dynasty stars, 3 wide receivers, 2 quarterbacks, and a tight end today on the docket. We're going to talk about what could be with these players and if we think they're going to actually achieve it. So Ty, why don't you start with us? Because this guy's really put it on over the last couple of weeks, including the playoffs. So are you buying this in for the regular season 2025?
I think I am. Xavier Worthy, tale of two seasons in his rookie year, weeks 1 through 10, wide receiver 62 in points per game, 76th in receptions, wide receiver 57 in usage, and just 6 design targets. He was a non-factor at the beginning of the year in this offense. And then in weeks 11 to 17, I excluded week 18 because he literally played 1 snap. I don't understand why, but I left week 18 out. In that stretch, Xavier Worthy, the wide receiver 24 in points per game, 17th in receptions, wide receiver 27 in usage with 12 design targets. So there was an uptick in usage in the second half of the season. There was an adjustment made with this Chiefs offense to get him the ball in space more than utilizing him as a downfield speedster option, right? Weeks 1 through 10 again, 23% of his targets were deep balls. 72% of his remaining targets then were either behind the line of scrimmage or within 10 yards of it. Again, on 43 targets. Second half of the year, weeks 11 to 17 with 55 targets, 12% of those targets were downfield, 20 yards or more. 83% of the remaining targets were either behind the line of scrimmage or within 10 yards of it. They were getting him the ball in space, and you've seen him score in the playoffs because he's running all these drag routes or all these kind of in-breaking routes over the middle. And with his speed, if you're not attached to the hip, he's going to burn you. And so Kansas City has kind of rode that with the passing game the second half of the year and into the playoffs. The big question is, well, you've got Rashee Rice in this offense. Yes, he's going to come off a torn ACL injury next year, but he's still major competition in this offense. So how is it really going to work with these guys? Don't they do a lot of similar things? I think they complement each other really well because Worthy plays only just 33% of his snaps from the slot, at least this year. 47% of Rashee Rice's snaps came from the slot in his lone full year last year. So yes, it's competition, but I don't think it's they're going to work against each other. I think they complement each other really well. Yes, you still have the Travis Kelce piece as well, but I think Xavier Worthy, this is a very good baseline, or I shouldn't say even baseline year. This is a very good rookie year to work off of, and I think he can take another step if they continue to utilize him. But even if the downfield stuff does come around, then you add in a big play action to Xavier Worthy's, I'll call it portfolio. Like Xavier Worthy could legitimately be a top 20 guy next year then.
Yeah, it'll be interesting too with Rashee Rice for next season. It was an LCL and PCL injury. They had to reattach it to the tendon to the hamstring. So there's thought that maybe he might not be fully himself in 2025. May kind of take a full year to really get back, which obviously just helps Xavier Worthy in that. But like you said, he's just so unbelievably dynamic that it would be shocking if Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes can't figure out how to keep him involved in the offense to get, make dynamic plays in place, even with Rashee Rice back. And like you said, he's got Rice has got the suspension on top of it coming back. Yeah. So that's probably 6+ games that he's going to see in 2025 on top of being, so even if he's ready to go in week 4, he's not probably playing till week 6. Not with the team till then. So it'll be really interesting, just all of these different, like factors coming into it. But I think I agree. I think what we saw from Worthy is this team wants to be able to use him. They understand how explosive he can be. And so they're going to continue to try to find ways to get him the ball.
Yeah, and the reason why the downfield stuff didn't really work out for them is because Mahomes just didn't have time in the pocket to let those routes develop and actually air it out for his guys. They still got off some attempts, but it wasn't as consistent or as much as people thought it was going to be when you add the fastest 40-yard runner in NFL Combine history to that team. So if Kansas City goes into the offseason, and I have to think that they are, with the goal of let's improve the offensive line, let's build up some time for Mahomes to let things develop. Again, I think there's going to be more shots downfield, more big plays than for Xavier Worthy to really, not just be so reliant on 8 targets for 60 yards and if he needs to find the end zone or not.
For sure. Before I jump into mine real quick, we do just want to put this out there that we know we're bringing this episode to you a week or a day late. Excuse me. Usually we have them out on Tuesdays, but unfortunately our TikTok account was banned with over 300,000 followers. We're still trying to figure it out, hopefully bringing that back. But we just wanted to explain why we were a day late, and hopefully we'll get that resolved in the meantime, but we won't spend too much time on it. So my guy is our first quarterback, Mr. Drake Maye, the Pro Bowler, Ty. The Pro Bowler, Drake Maye. Woo! Just like everybody thought at the end of the season. This is a Snoop Huntley Pro Bowl, if there ever was another one. Yep. It is absolutely ridiculous that he's in the Pro Bowl. A joke, really. The Pro Bowl has fully turned into a joke. I mean, I think he got his first start in week 5, and we're going to give him the Pro Bowl. Didn't even have great stats. But a big part of that is because he had 0 offensive weapons and the 32nd ranked offensive line, according to PFF. Do you know how many teams there are in the NFL, Ty?
32.
32, and they were ranked 32nd. So just absolutely brutal. His leading receiver was Hunter Henry with 66 receptions for 670 yards. If that's your leading receiver, you're in trouble from the get-go as a quarterback. But what Drake Maye really showed this year is, we kind of thought maybe he'd, be able to do it, but he's going to have consistent rushing upside. 37 rush yards a game over the beginning of the season, which was on pace for 630 rushing yards, similar to Josh Allen. I'm not saying he's Josh Allen. Do not hear what I'm not saying, but similar rushing numbers. I don't think he's going to score 15 rushing touchdowns this season, but at least yards-wise. He was a quarterback 12 week 6, which was his first week as a starter, through week 16. Week 17, he played bad, so I'm going to just leave it out there because it doesn't fit my stat quite as well. And week 18, he only played one snap. But he had he had the same completion percentage as Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, but he was 26th in yards per attempt, 28th in average depth of target, 28th in deep throw percentage. And all of that was because he had the 4th lowest time to pressure out of all quarterbacks that started a game in the NFL this year. And he was also under pressure on the highest percent of all of his dropbacks out of any quarterback. So they were getting to him quickly, and every time he was under pressure compared to more than every other quarterback. So what it really means is, from a team perspective around him, offensive line, weapons, it will not be worse this year than what Drake Maye had to deal with, or worse in 2025 than what Drake Maye had to deal with this year. It was terrible. I mean, the Patriots were so bad on offense. So you're looking, for that improvement. He showed sign after sign of, he does have that big playability with his arm. He looked good, good. He looked as calm as you could with all that coming at you. So I think Drake Maye is really, it's a time to buy. I understand a keep trade cut. He's, the quarterback 8. So it's not, not a cheap buy by any means. But if you got Drake Maye, I'm not selling on him either. I think would kind of be a good way to put it.
Yeah, the talent alone would tell you that Drake Maye is someone to invest in. But when you look at the situation with New England, right, the most effective cap space of any team in the league this offseason with over $100 million. So you can go and spend some money, right? You have to think that it's going to go towards offensive line because, like you said, the dude had no time this year to throw the ball. And to do what he did with that, pretty impressive. Not going to lie. But then the other part of this too is that the New England Patriots, they have 5 picks in the first 104 picks. Use that on a playmaker or 2 on the outside, build up the offensive line some more. There is a lot of things that New England can do to support Drake Maye this offseason. And again, if you can get in, an elite weapon, if you recklessly speculating, I don't know why T. Higgins would want to go to New England, but if you can bring in a T. Higgins, that dramatically improves the outlook for Drake Maye. So I think right now, if you're going to invest in him, now's the time before money is spent and draft picks are submitted, because once that roster improves around him, that price is also going to go up.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point of now, if you are going to buy in on Drake Maye, if you're going to kind of call that shot, now is the time to do it. Because like you said, it's the roster itself is only going to get better. They're only going to add draft picks. They're only going to add free agents. Nobody's going to leave that's going to make you go, oh, dang it. I don't think they're going to be quite as good next season. So I would agree. I think at this point, he is probably at the lowest he will be until a couple weeks in the season if he, absolutely tanks at the beginning of the year. Before I throw it back to you for our second quarterback of the episode, Ty, we just want to let the people know we are fully committed to bringing you the best podcast that we can possibly bring you. 2 a week until the season starts, then we'll go into 3. We got live drafts on live mock drafts going on every single week. We're still getting the kinks worked out on that, but we want to make sure that you're subscribed, that you're turning on those notifications as well. I'm all over the place with this, but we just want you. Yeah, exactly. You should not have it this late, kids. Stay off caffeine. But we want you to join the fellowship. If you're on the audio podcast, we thank you as well. Enough of me blabbing around, Ty. I'll give it back to you. I'll let you talk about your quarterback because we were not fans of this guy at the beginning of the year. That's for sure.
No, and I think it would have made way more sense to have this guy as a Pro Bowler over Drake Maye, but it's Bo Nix. Again, like you said, we were not big believers. I don't think many people were big believers in Bo Nix heading into the season. And I think the season that he had, he probably shut a lot of us up because it was a really good season for Bo Nix. He was 12th in passing yards, finished 6th in passing touchdowns, 8th in rushing yards. And from a fantasy perspective, he was the QB9 in points per game, including a stretch from week 8 on where he was the quarterback 7 in points per game. And for all the haters that said like he was not good at throwing downfield, the deep ball was an issue, the guy was top 10 in deep ball adjusted completion percentage according to PFF. Okay, so a lot of the critiques that people had of Bo Nix going into this year, he did prove wrong. I believe that this was just the beginning. And you could say this is the other side of the coin, right? For Drake Maye in his rookie year, horrible offensive line, terrible offense to go into, and to produce like he did, again, like I said, all things considered, really, really impressive. For Bo Nix, he took advantage of things going right for his situation, right? Great offensive line, first in pass blocking grade per PFF, and this team now has the ability to add another pass catcher via the draft or free agency. I love like a Luther Burden going to Denver, complementing or being a nice compliment then to Cortland Sutton, who's a big physical receiver. And then you got an absolute yak monster with Luther Burden. Then I think, again, for all that didn't go right for Drake Maye, things did go right for Bo Nix. And so it's going to be probably a little more expensive. Actually, you should pull that up for me. Do people have
what? No. Before you get going.
Oh, yeah.
What are you doing disrespecting Marvin Mims like that? Talking about bringing in a yak monster. They already got a yak monster. It is unreal that you could just disrespect.
I should have just said Devon Vele at that point. Jeez.
I get, yes.
Lucas Kroll, Adam Troutman. We two can play this game.
Hey, Adam Troutman had his summer where we all believed he was the next great tight end.
So did Greg Dulcich, and how did that go?
Brutal.
Brutal. I shouldn't even say it's just pass catchers though for Denver. Javonte Williams is a free agent, and he's not, for whatever reason, it seems like he's pretty much out the door. Sean Payton does not want him in the offense. You've got an Audric Estime already, but if you can get that run game going as well in Denver, like Bo Nix can be even more efficient than he was this year. So again, Bo Nix might be a harder piece to trade for at this point, just because he's had the success compared to a Drake Maye again. But I think Bo Nix, with where Denver finished this year, right moves are made, he can take another step.
Yeah, he is currently ranked 4 total spots behind Drake Maye. So Drake Maye is the quarterback 9, spot 56 overall for keep trade cut. Bo Nix is spot 60, quarterback 11, with Caleb Williams right in the middle. So they're all kind of bunched together very similarly, ranked over on Keep Trade Cut by the people. But Bo Nix also kind of surprised with the rushing game that he added as well. Like you said, eighth in rushing yards among quarterbacks. That's huge. That's something we kind of were like, oh, he's sneaky athletic, right? That we keep throwing on guys like Bo Nix, I'll say. But he actually was, adding fantasy value that way. I don't want to say, because I hate that comparison of him and Drew Brees, of people like, oh, Sean Payton found his next Drew Brees. But from the aspect of a guy who can make a quick decision, get the ball out quickly, and hit a guy in stride, Bo Nix is that type of quarterback who is going to succeed with Sean Payton. So that's why I think at the beginning of the year, we wanted Sean, like I know personally, looking back on it, I wanted Sean Payton to fail so badly as a Vikings fan.
Right.
And I
Every
really
Vikings
think,
fan.
and I really think that clouded my judgment of Bo Nix, because I was like, Sean Payton's going to fail. He failed with Russ. He's toast. He doesn't have Drew Brees. We hate him. But he proved, you know what? Sean Payton does know what he's doing. He helped Bo Nix here. And like you said, if they can continue to add pieces, as much as I love Marvin Mims, there are better pieces out there than him as your wide receiver too. And so, like you said, you pair him and Cortland Sutton and Luther Burden, Cortland Sutton and you name it from this draft class. I really think that goes a long way just to helping Bo Nix continue to take that next step. Before I get to my player, we're going to take a quick break and hear from our friends over at Underdog Fantasy.
Today's podcast episode is brought to you by our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Now, we love Underdog. It is the easiest place to play best ball formats, and they even have their own form of player props called Pick'em. You can make up to 20 times your money on a single night by correlating props together. 2 picks will triple your money, 3 will 6 times it, 4 will 10 times it, and 5 plays that all hit will multiply your entry by 20. You can even place insurance on your picks too, so if only 4 of your 5 props hit, you still get 10 times your entry. And if you use our code FELLAS when signing up, Underdog is going to double your first deposit up to $100.
We are back, and we got 2 more wide receivers and a tight end for you. We're going to start in Chicago with Mr. Rome Odunze. And I think we can sum it up with they got Ben Johnson, and there's probably no more Keenan Allen, right? I think that's pretty, a pretty big statement for Rome himself. But when we look at the Bears this year, Caleb Williams, I think people like to hate on him because of his personality and all that, and all the extracurriculars. Yes, the fingernails, exactly. All the extracurriculars outside of throwing the football. But we do need to be honest. He did have 3,500 yards, 20 passing touchdowns, and only 6 interceptions with 3 different offensive coordinators throughout the season. Right. That's a lot of different offensive coordinators your rookie year. And to still, be effective throwing the ball. I know, like, it wasn't as flashy. People are comparing him to Jaden Daniels, which obviously you can't because the dude lit the world on fire. But for Rome, I think that is, that gets you excited for the future because you see, okay, if this is as unstable as the Bears are going to be for probably the next 3 years, and that's how Caleb did in his first year, I think it's going to improve moving forward. For Rome, he did average 80% of snaps. From weeks 8, which was after his bye, to week 16, he only had 1 game with under 6 targets. And he's competing with Keenan Allen and DJ Moore for those targets. You take away Keenan Allen, who, moved more like a tight end this year than I think a wide receiver. He was still a target hog, right? Keenan Allen, you can take away all the speed, but he's got that Anquan Bolden-esque movement to him where he still finds a way to get open every single time, even though it looks like he's barely moving. The one thing I really think Rome Odunze has got going for him, obviously they have the draft capital. You still have Ryan Poles there, so they're still going to believe in him from that aspect. But he was top 10 in end zone targets last season, which I was shocked by. But when you think about it, he was the only player to have 14 plus end zone targets and have less than 6 touchdowns. He had 3 of them. Right. So it just didn't convert. But what we noticed is Caleb trusts the guy in the end zone. And then he was also 3rd in contested catch rate. So Rome came out of college and he did couple things really well. He was a pretty good route runner, great contested catch, and he scored touchdowns. Well, he showed in his first season that he's at least getting the targets in the end zone. Still a great contested catch guy. And I think when you add in Ben Johnson, the fact that he's going to be the clear-cut wide receiver 2, and that they've already been playing him 80% of snaps, that we're just going to see Rome Odunze take another step forward. And out of all these wide receivers that came out of the first round last year, I think he's been pushed down the most, just because obviously we didn't get that first-year explosion like we saw from Neighbors, Brian Thomas, and Ladd McConkey.
Rome Odunze was, according to some people had Rome Odunze ahead of like a Malik Neighbors and Marvin Harrison Jr. in their wide receiver rankings. So the talent is absolutely there. It was just a shame that we had the rookie year where you're competing against DJ Moore and Keenan Allen.
Yep.
And you have, again, I don't want incompetent is too harsh, because we are just, fans of football. We don't.
Would you have called the timeout?
1000%. I would have called the timeout at like 20 seconds.
Incompetent is the right word.
Okay. I needed the pass, but again, Rome Odunze was a consensus top 3 wide receiver. He was taken with a top 10 pick. Like, the dude oozes talent, and all because now he has one bad year. We're already putting him behind the Ladd McConkeys of the world. Marvin Harrison Jr. still somehow, that one's up for debate, but there are people out there that would prefer an Xavier Worthy over Rome Odunze. It's stuff like that that's just like, guys, we've lost the picture in the perspective on Rome Odunze and his talents and skill set for the guy that was really just utilized. I should say, just put in a box to be the downfield guy, because the guy was 15th in air yards of all wide receivers. He was 3rd in unrealized air yards, right? So these big plays happened, but not all the time, right? Now that Keenan Allen's out of the way, I think he's going to be able to show his true colors, that he is actually a very good route runner, while possessing the contested catch, high point ability that he has. And again, with the end zone targets, he's a big target, man. Like, he's going to find plenty of that in Ben Johnson's offense. So I feel like this is probably this is like the last time to really go in on Rome Odunze, because I think after this upcoming year, I don't want to say he's going to be a top 10 guy, but you're going to have to pay much more. You're going to have to pay a much more handsome fee for a Rome Odunze than you will be this offseason. Yeah,
and I just, he had 100 targets this season. But like you said, he went into a very different situation than every other, first-round wide receiver, really. Because you look at it, Marvin Harrison Jr., the only wide receiver in Arizona. Malik Neighbors, the only wide receiver in New York. Brian Thomas really ended up being the only wide receiver in Jacksonville. Ladd McConkey, the only wide receiver really in Los Angeles. Xavier Worthy ended up being, right, he wasn't the only wide receiver, but his competition was Hollywood, who didn't play the whole season, DeAndre Hopkins, and Juju Smith-Schuster. So you just look at all of these first-round wide receivers, and they went into vastly different situations than Rome Odunze. And to just hold that against him when we've seen the sparks, and now we get an offensive, I think you got to say mastermind at this point in Brian Johnson. It just doesn't make sense that we're going to hold him back because of that first year. So yeah.
Ben Johnson, Brian Johnson, it was the old offensive coordinator in Philly.
Was that what I said?
QB coach in Washington. Yeah, very.
Did I say Brian Johnson?
Very different.
See, I knew I said that earlier, and so I was conscious trying to say it of saying Ben Johnson, because I knew that I was going to be wrong, and then I screwed it up because I was thinking about it. But anyways, let's talk about your guy, division rival Ty. We're keeping it in the division. Actually, for these last 3 players, we're staying in the NFC North, and we're not going to talk a single time about one of our Minnesota Vikings.
See, so that's how you know we're not actual homers.
Yes,
like
exactly.
We shine light to all the other teams.
Well, we're just going to rag on these next 2 guys. But why don't you take it away with our only tight end of this episode?
Yeah, if you could have guessed who was going to talk about the tight end when Cam mentioned him at the beginning, I hope you would have guessed that it was Cam. But surprise, it's actually me. Tucker Kraft is a fascinating tight end target this offseason. Tight end, I believe he's the tight end 7, according to Keep Trade Cut already. So there is no like discount on Tucker Kraft. A lot of people are expecting him to take another step next year after what was a pretty efficient year for him. Of all tight ends with 25 or more targets, he was first in yards after the catch per reception. He had the second highest percentage of targets from design plays at the position, which is a great sign for tight ends. He was 7th in yards per route run, and he was the tight end 10 overall this year, while being 21st in targets and tight end 27 in usage, according to fantasy points data, right? Insanely efficient year. But Matt LaFleur has already said that they need to find him and feature him more in the offense. And when you look ahead to 2025, you're going to be without Christian Watson for the majority of the season, if not the entire season. And you just got really inconsistent play and production from Jaden Reed and Dontavion Wicks, 2 of your quote-unquote wide receiver ones. There's our shot.
Yep. Beautiful.
Tucker Kraft is in a prime spot to take another step as things stand right now before we've gotten into the heart of the offseason, because I think I'm going to leave the door open for Green Bay to go make a move or something. Again, T. Higgins can fit for every team that needs a receiver, but like if Green Bay brings in a T. Higgins, that might hurt the receivers a bit. But with Tucker Kraft's skill set as this kind of yak monster at the tight end position, a lot of people draw the George Kittle comparisons, but promise me, I'm not saying he's the next George Kittle, but he's got a skill set at the tight end position that not many other tight ends possess, right? That after the catchability, he did finish, I believe, top 10 in receiving yards on the year as well at the position. So I think Tucker Kraft going into year 3 now, after really poor, inconsistent wide receiver play in this offense, I think he has shown the brightest light out of all the pass catchers. And I would not be surprised if he takes another step in usage and really becomes a solidified piece for the Packers offense and then in fantasy as well.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up George Kittle. He was the only tight end that compared to George Kittle in terms of yards per reception. Kittle had 14.2. Tucker Kraft had 14.1. There was no other tight end, I think, with 50 targets who had over 12. Sam Laporte had 12.1 as the next closest with 83 targets. So
2 yards.
Yeah, it's they are being used down the field, and like you said, you probably want them to go get a dominant wide receiver one, if anything, on this offense, because you'd rather have the defense focusing on someone else and allowing Tucker Kraft to make moves in the middle of the field than expecting Tucker Kraft to truly be the number one in this offense. Right? I don't think that Tucker Kraft is built to do that. I think he's a phenomenal player, but I think at the end of the day, he will be better off if he's got another wide receiver there to really kind of take off the load of that defense, to be able to kind of get lost in the seam and make plays that way. So I do agree, though, that if you're going to take a chance on a young tight end, he would be the guy to do it. Especially, Brock Bowers, Trey McBride, probably even Sam Laporta at this point are pretty priced out. For sure, McBride and Bowers pretty priced out from going to acquire. You look at the rest of them, Kittle. I'm just going to look at points per game real quick from tight ends. Njoku's almost 30. Jonnu Smith's almost 30. Travis Kelce's knocking on the door of retirement. Mark Andrews knocking on the door of retirement. George Kittle's 31. Or I shouldn't say Mark Andrews knocking on the door of retirement. Mark Andrews almost 30. So, right, you're getting an older batch of tight ends where Tucker Kraft comes in and he could be a top 6 option for a couple years to come, just because we're going to lose so many of these tight ends that we've kind of grown accustomed to being consistent at the position. My last guy, Ty, I want to just have a discussion about these last guys we brought up. We've each kind of believed in who they're going to be. This last player, I'm not sure if I believe in him, but I think people want to have a discussion about him because Jameson Williams just lost Ben Johnson, who we talked about Rome Odunze getting. So what does that mean for him? Because in the beginning of the year, we really thought that he had it figured out. 9 and 11 targets in the first 2 games. Amon-Ra wasn't really producing. It was like, holy cow, have the roles switched? Sam Laporta wasn't doing anything. It was a Jameson Williams show. And it didn't quite finish like that, but we did see really an emergence from Jameson Williams this year after a lot of people had written him off coming into the, year 3 for him. But he was 20th in yards per route run, which was comparable to, Devontae Adams, Terry McLaurin, George Pickens range. He was only 47th in target share with 17.6% because of just how much the Lions threw in general. That's very similar to Rome Odunze, Cade Otton, and Darnell Mooney. But the big kicker for him there is he was 3rd in yards after yards after the catch per reception. Right, he was behind only Debo and I think Khalil Shakir in that. And then he was 43rd in first read rate and 32nd in first downs per route run. So advanced metrics, you're probably looking between a wide receiver 2 and 3. He's got, stuff like yards after the catch. So I guess I'm going to ask you then, Ty, so that I have time to kind of reformulate my opinion based off what you say. Do you believe in Jameson Williams going into this year?
That's pretty subjective. I'm not gonna lie. Duh, that's why you asked me. Look, he has come a long way. That has to be said. Coming out of Alabama in the draft and then going to Detroit, his trump card as a prospect was his speed. He was put in situations in Alabama where he would get the ball in space and he could use his speed. It took him a while to really kind of put the route running and the separation together with then the after the catch ability. I think my hope for Jameson Williams is that he can continue. I don't know if he can take a gigantic step where he is a consistent, lock in your fantasy lineups, but I'm hopeful because this Detroit offense, yes, you lose Ben Johnson, but you still have all of your players. You still got people there, right? So their new offensive coordinator, again, is not Ben Johnson. There's going to be a lot of risk, I think, involved with that because I don't know if you can exactly replicate what Ben Johnson did with his offense. But for the progression and trajectory that Jameson Williams has shown in 3 years, I feel like it's only logical to say that, he's going to take another step again for the team that literally was 0.1 plays per game behind the number 1 team in Washington. So a ton of plays on this offense. Jameson Williams should get plenty of opportunities to prove that he can take that next step.
Yeah. I've been kind of trying to process my thoughts on him all day. And I think where I've landed is you really got to call your shot this year on this Lions offense.
Yes, you do.
On everybody except for Jahmyr Gibbs for me personally. And I'm going to explain why I even say I'm on Raw in there. Just because I think, Gibbs is as safe as I think you can get with the way Dan Campbell's going to run this offense. But you look at Amon-Ra, if he scored 12 touchdowns this year. If he scores his career average of 7, he's the wide receiver 19 in points per game. And so you just have so many weapons on this team. Sam Laporta, Jameson Williams, Amon-Ra, David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs that are so good that it's who do you think is going to truly emerge, right? I still think Amon-Ra is going to emerge, but then it's, do you think Sam Laporta or Jameson Williams, is one of them going to edge the other out as the, second option? Or is it going to be kind of like they're both 2A, 2B of one of them just takes the deep shot, Sam Laporta takes the underneath. There's no real mix, right? One of them doesn't stand above. So I think with Jameson Williams, you just really have to take, just kind of call your shot on it almost of, do you think he takes that step of being that second option? Or is he kind of stuck in this in-between land of he's just going to continue to be fighting for targets from Sam Laporta and Jahmyr Gibbs, who are both phenomenal players in and of themselves?
That's probably the best way to put it. There's no copycat. There is no 1-for-1 replacement for Ben Johnson in the way that he put these guys in, positions to succeed, right? I think it's easy to conclude that when you compare a tight end taking a step forward to a wide receiver, it's easier to think of the step forward for the receiver versus the tight end, because you're like, well, the tight end can just get better at run blocking versus the receiver is just running routes, right? I think all things considered, if Jameson Williams continues to be utilized downfield like he was with Ben Johnson's offense, may not be the same creativity, right? It may not be the fake fumbles, right? It may not be the hook and ladders all the time. But I think that this offense is talented enough that they will be able to find their playmakers. Amon-Ra, like you said, he's still going to be a dude, right? He is uber talented, and he's still going to get 9, 10, 11 targets a game. Jameson Williams, our hope probably is that he gets 7 to 8 targets consistently per game. And then one of those can actually, be a big play that can be a week altering week for your fantasy team.
For sure. So I'm just thinking through it of what I would do if I had Jameson Williams. And I think I would try and either tier up or tier down. I think I'm moving on from Jameson Williams just from a risk management standpoint of, could he take the jump? Yes. Do I think he's going to take the jump to be a top 15 option? I personally don't, because right now he's priced in as the wide receiver 22 for keep trade cut, which I feel like it's probably a little rich right now for me. And could he make me regret it? Absolutely. I think he is that kind of talent. I just am going to kind of play the odds on a guy who's used more as a deep threat, that he's not going to make me regret trading him away to getting probably a more consistent piece. Because like you said, he's always going to have that ability to go out there and win you a week. But if it's like this year, he's also going to have the ability to go out there and have 3 targets for 1 reception and 11 yards and lose you the week. So that is kind of where I stand on Jameson Williams.
All right,
with that. Yep, for sure. With that, that wraps up our 6 emerging dynasty stars. Thank you for hanging in there with us this week. Again, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you turn on those notifications. We got some Super Bowl secrets that Lucas has been cooking up for tomorrow. So that should be interesting. Make sure you tune in for that. And then, we're going to watch the big game with Chiefs Eagles. We'll talk about who we want to win that one next week. But we all know it's neither team. So you can find us on Twitter or the X at CamelFFF. Tyler's at Tyler_Plath. The FFL is FFL is on Twitter. The FFL is on Instagram. Fantasy Football Fellas on YouTube and Facebook. We will see about TikTok. Hopefully we'll have some answers in the coming days. But who knows with that adventure. And then you can find us at Fantasy Football Fellas Shorts on YouTube for our short form content over there. Thanks again for hanging out with us, and we'll see you tomorrow. Deuces.